If you've watched my other training videos, you know that I don't like it when scenes have a lot of backstory at the beginning. But that doesn't mean you can't put context or explanation later on in your piece. But you got to first bring the reader into your world, into your scene, and then you can give them some context, you can give them some explanation of things, as long as that's interesting as well. You don't want to stop the story for too long. And I give an example here of a story that begins with that action, with bringing the reader into her world in a really interesting way, and then providing a little backstory that's also kind of interesting about the grandma. So let me read this. It starts off, I stopped talking to Long Long and sat up straight when my grandma walked into the room. She put a pot of soup on the delicate rosewood dining table and sat down at one end. Long Long and I sat on either side of her. I stared at the dainty dishes and felt starved. Hands, my grandma said to us. We quickly put our hands on the table. Grandma lightly pressed her glasses to her eyes, carefully inspected our hands, and satisfactorily announced, Good, let's eat. Remember, no talking while eating. So that's the opening, right? So that's the opening of the scene. It gets us right in there. We learn about the author, about this character named Long Long, who we assume is a child, and the grandma. And the grandma seems to, have these concern for sanitary issues with the hands. She's very old school in that regard. I think today most of us don't really think much about that. But back in the day, the grandmothers probably were more concerned about that kind of thing. So that gets us into the story. We were with the characters, we're in the room. Great. Now, the author then gives a few more contextual details. So there is no story here about having the soup, right? This is context. Some people might say this is a little too much. Let's get back to the soup. Let's get back to the table with Long Long. But this is kind of interesting too, and I'm going to read it out because it is interesting to me and maybe to you. So the author writes, Long Long and I always had dinner at Grandma's during elementary school. Our school was a 10-minute walk away from Grandma's house. My grandma was born in a big and rich family that lived off collecting the land taxes in the old Chinese society. Communism claimed collective ownership of the land, and the Cultural Revolution took away her family's wealth. My grandma moved to a much smaller apartment where she shared one bathroom with 4 other neighbors and started a new life without her maids at age 22. She got married to my grandpa, worked in a hospital, and learned to cook. Grandma still kept some of her nobility from the past. For example, she never washed her hair by herself. Instead, she went to salon every other day and had other people take care of her hair. She looked young with her gorgeous long black hair. The refined manners she learned from her mother tortured the rest of the female members in our family. We called her Grandma Fairlady. So a lot of context there, and it's not part of the story. The story ended right here, or paused right at this point. But I like it, and I like some of this detail. I think maybe if I had put this detail up front, up here, above the story, maybe it would have made me less interested because I don't know what's happening. It's just some random person that grew up in China. But because we have the story at the beginning, it's okay. It's okay to have that. And also this stuff about her name, Grandma Fairlady, it kind of explains why she's so worried about the hands and making sure that everything's sanitary. So again, tip here, start with the story. And if you want to add in some detail about the context, about the background, as long as it's very interesting detail and serves a purpose in explaining the characters, then go ahead and do that. Now, right after this line about we called her Grandma Fairlady, the story actually continues at the table with the soup. So we're pretty quickly back to the story. So just keep in mind, you don't want to divert from the story for too long, unless it's really interesting, as it is here. Get back to the story as soon as you can.